computer today. Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Dr. Schoel. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, awesome, awesome. As soon as I saw book one for you, I was like, yeah, this has to go on my list. So I added you right away into my contact list. I have like a huge, huge list of them. It's kind of ridiculous, but yeah, I was like, I gotta, get this person on, as quickly as possible. So I had a sci-fi person drop. I was like, all right, let's do this thing. So I'm so glad that we could have you on today. I lied to you last night when I emailed you and said I don't have time to read anything beforehand. I was like, I'll just get through the first couple chapters of book one, and then I just like flew through it almost in one sitting. And I actually started book two. So I'm really, really excited to get to ask you some questions today. Don't worry, crowd, I won't spoil anything. But trust me, you'll like my review once you guys see it here in the audience. So that'll be connected by the time this airs as well. But thank you so much for coming on today. We'll start with that first question. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
It's been a long journey. I should mention, because I don't know if we've discussed that before in any of our back or forth. I kind of work more or have up until recently in film and television.
Oh, cool.
So I was really into sci-fi when I was young. Then I went to film school, and I sort of veered off a lot more into screenwriting. So I worked in productions and so on, but it was really focused on screenwriting for 20 more plus
Oh, wow.
years or so. And also, what I found is up until the pandemic, let's say, where I am in Canada, we have a lot of arts grants agencies.
Hmm.
So aside from my regular work, I do a lot of writing on TV shows, but you could also get lots of, you could get well paid to write stuff from arts grants that actually never get made necessarily. Some of them do. So I've had feature film, documentaries that were made, but it's like 1 out of 10. So during the pandemic, I started getting a little annoyed with the fact that I'm getting well paid to write all this stuff, but only like 10% of it is reaching an audience. So then I said, why don't I go back to writing a little bit what I like? Because that's the other thing when you're writing for, well, producers, arts councils, you're
Yeah, yeah,
kind of writing a bit like for other people, what they
yeah.
want, the producers telling you, especially arts councils, there's different ones and they have different orientations. So I was like, you know, yes, I'm doing it because I got a family, I got a mortgage, I got the rest of it. So I got to focus on my film and TV career. But why don't I go back to writing a little bit like really what, I wanted to do when I was a kid, when I was younger. So that's sort of what got me back, especially with the pandemic. Everything's closed down, right? The production office where I work was closed. Here in Canada, we got money from the government to just do whatever. They had one of the grants agencies that I worked, that I had just before the pandemic, a grant for. They're like, oh, it's the COVID here. We're just going to give you money to go and like develop like whatever, like because normally you have to have a project and you submit in a whole long procedure, right? And he's like, oh, here's like money to go write something. And I was like, well, they're not asking what it's for. I'll just go work on my sci-fi thing. And then what happened after that? Because at first it was like an experiment, right? I was like, because I hadn't really written, I'd written, because screenplay writing is also a little bit different than prose writing. Like the
Yeah,
whole,
yeah.
I had done it in university when I was young, writing short stories and stuff. But I hadn't really gone back to it. I was sort of like, I'm just going to do scripts and focus on that. Um, and sort of to my surprise, I was like, I kind of like this writing my stories better than the scripts. So I was just sort of kept going up to now, and that's now, I guess. I mean, because I had started just before the pandemic, when I had another big project, film project that fell through. I was like really kind of devastating.
I know
So
that
it's
feeling.
sort of like 6 years or so that I've been doing these stories, and like really enjoying it. So just keep going with that, and yeah, I'd like still do the film and TV stuff since they pay well, also for that. So it's sort of like the side by side. These days, I'm sort of installed at home for writing and post-production work, where they had set me up during the pandemic with mini sort of TV film studio. So I'll kind of write in the morning, and since I'm home and I could like work late, not miss my family, and then I do other stuff until I'm burnt out, not that late, like 8, 9 o'clock, and then close up shop. So I spend like a third of my day writing, my stuff, and then after lunch to supper, and then after supper, a couple more hours doing the work that I have to do, and hopefully could retire from soon.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, like with the pandemic, because I was like working hard on a graphic novel that was like kind of like a Diablo thing with the video game, and like
Mhm.
Evil Unleashed from like the Catacombs sort of thing. And I had an amazing artist. We were going to do black and white for the actual graphic novel, and then we were so close. I'm so glad we didn't spend any money because then the pandemic happened. Like I got stalled for a master's program with my
Wow.
graphic novel. Yeah, luckily, right? And but like now it's like sitting in the back. I actually just changed it to a novel, and yeah, so I'm like probably going to be writing that pretty soon as just like a fun kind of fantasy thing, dark fantasy. But I feel yeah, because I my wife was like, oh, are you ever going to go back and want to do another graphic novel? Because I was really going to be an illustrator and I love art, and I was like, I hope so, but right now I was like, it just doesn't really seem like it's in the cards. But now Kickstarter's back up again, so it'd be cool, I think, to just one of those career things. But I definitely feel you there. Definitely.
Definitely try for it. I mean, when I was young, I mean, comics, graphic novels, and stuff. I mean, I still, read them, and I'm into that kind of stuff. Even for my daughter, I try and introduce her to some different stuff, for that. So people have mentioned for my stories about that. I've worked on
Oh,
some
that'd be
scripts where,
cool. Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
worked on some other scripts too, where like when they start, like people are like, oh, well, why don't you just turn it into a graphic novel? But it's like graphic novel is not so easy.
Yeah, they
It's
say
not that
that
easy.
just. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know, but I mean, I've kind of gone through my career life from like being interested in the visual art storytelling across, film, graphic writing. But as I'm getting older, it's like, well, what am I good at? And just telling my stories. And so, just writing, and sort of somewhere along the line, after 25 years of writing scripts and producers telling you all kinds of stuff, and when you're writing a script, you're trying to do it, as it's not the finished thing. It's going to be,
Yep.
the images and stuff. And that's kind of what kept me from writing a little bit stories, because I kind of felt I see it in my head, but it's not, it'll be, if I made it into a movie, right, then people will see exactly what's in my head. But that
Yep.
doesn't really work for films anyway. And I felt my writing got to a point where it's like, no, this is work. It doesn't need to be turned into a movie. I mean, it'd be cool if it is, whatever, or a comic
Yeah,
book,
yeah, yeah.
but I felt that I was finally, after like 20, 30 years of writing, having enough control over my craft and my thought process, whatever, to be like satisfied, like this is the thing that I want to say, that I want to put out there, and it doesn't have to be like turned into a movie or a visual medium, or it would be nice if it is. I'm not complaining about that.
Yeah.
But I just, whereas when I was younger, I always felt frustrated that I couldn't express what I wanted in the writing. And now I feel like I'm getting across, and I'm in control of the writing, and I'm just focusing on that more, rather than spread out on all sorts of other, different arts and stuff like that. So
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I do think it's a hard transition. I originally had screenplays and stuff. I actually had one that I was about to sell, but it was like a thing. I was worried they're going to change too much of it. And I was like, I kind of rather just, keep the integrity of the story and then keep it for myself and do something with it later. But yeah, it's just, I try to explain to people like, how is it different? I'm like, it's a totally different medium. Like there's still words, but that's like comic writing, right? You say so many things with the image and people just don't understand, I think, the different mediums. They think writing's writing, and the way to start doing each one, I think, is to write, but you still have
yeah,
to, like you're saying, I totally get it. It was very difficult for me at first because I was doing it like a screenplay, and I think sometimes that background helps me today in terms of scenes and stuff. I've gotten some great feedback from alpha readers and stuff, but at the same time, there's still stuff that, like you're saying, like that was like the feedback I got was like, hey, you need to work on these things. And I don't know. To me, it's because I started with different mediums and not just novels or short stories, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
I totally get what you're saying. Yeah. It is
yeah.
nice once you get that experience leveled out, though.
Yeah, I mean, film is also a complicated thing, because
Yeah.
until some of your work is being turned into films, you don't necessarily see. I mean, I went to film school, and so I went through that a little bit, just because you're in film school. So whatever I write is automatically turned into a short film or something, just through the class.
Yeah.
But then later, working with producers, and you have like, it becomes work by committee, and some producers are good, some, like, have no clue what they're doing, that I've worked with. And it just becomes very hard to do that. I've had meetings where also like you meet producers and you're talking about your thing for a half hour, and then it's like, did you actually read what I wrote? No, like this is what we're here to talk about, and you haven't read. But like some of it went quite far. I mean, I had a project with Netflix and so on, so
Oh,
because I
cool.
had stuff happening here, and that was a project that went quite far. And then when it collapsed, that kind of was a bit devastating. So, and it was sort of very opaque why they dropped the project, but it was a pretty
Yeah.
high profile project also. So, just not to name drop too much, but Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was with his son on a biopic,
Oh, that's cool.
and it was like, for some reason, like his son, Chad, was like super happy with what we were writing, but Netflix just turned around and, like after giving us the green light for development, turned around like after a year and a half, and sorry, we're not interested. We don't even want to read, what you've been doing. Just like we're not doing it anymore. So
Well, it's like my
hard
my
business.
my old drama teacher. He actually was so close to co-starring. I think it was with oh Jack Nicholson actually in a movie, and he was like, it was right there. He was about to move, and then last minute they're like, oh, never mind, and then Jack went to work on something else. So he was always like, oh, it's so close to the big screen. Or like, yep. So definitely,
It's a
definitely with
hard.
you on
It's a,
that
well,
one.
I was just close to the little streaming screen, but you know,
Yeah.
but it's a hard business. So that kind of, I still work in it, but mostly on documentaries and TV shows and stuff. And I'm happy doing my writing now, where I don't have some mysterious person at Netflix or wherever telling me to go take a hike or whatever. So, I mean, this weird world we live in now with Amazon and the publishing and stuff that we're doing, it's kind of really cool that you reach people and like a wide audience potentially, right? And you
Yeah.
get feedback from people, and that's like helped me as I've released my stories better than producers who, often don't even have their eye on like the story. They're just thinking of weird financial sort of things.
Yeah.
I get feedback from people like directly on what I'm writing, and I found that much more like just fun for what I'm doing. So like I'm keeping with that.
No, I don't blame you there. Well, speaking of your work, so we're gonna go with that second question. And I'll ask you some follow-ups here. So, why the Galactic Culinary Society, and how did you come about with this idea?
That is a good question. And I mean, I guess there's a kind of two sources. So one would be, I like sci-fi. So I wanted to do something. And I've always liked also just sort of like that epic Star Wars kind of stuff is cool. But for me, I felt more something that's like well, I don't know, Indiana Jones, like an adventurer kind of thing, where I'm not locked into this like epic space battle that I know nothing about kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and in my family also, food has always been really important for traditions and stuff. My brother, who's in Texas, was a co-owner of like this gourmet restaurant and stuff. When we were young, he was always watching the cooking shows, and for like my parents' birthday or Father's Day or Mother's Day or whatever, he'd make a big fancy meal, and I'd be the sous chef. So he's my older brother, right? And so that was a thing always in our family. Then as I got older and started traveling, my wife is Chinese. If I mentioned I work in documentaries, so it's a lot with Inuit people in the Arctic. So I was always been interested in trying. I'm not Mr. Super Adventure like really, myself. I'd love to be Indiana Jones, but to me, like trying something new and different, whatever, was sort of like, okay, that's my speed a little bit more than risking my neck. So whenever I traveled in China or up north and stuff, where they have like very different traditions, so trying something different, and it was a window or a way into someone else's culture, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sort of like a friendly way, whatever, like because you're just talking and eating, and they're enthusiastic to introduce it to you. So that was sort of like the basic thing. But then I didn't really have a way like, how do I turn this into a story? Somewhere along the line, I heard of the idea of a chef hunter, which is someone who's not necessarily a chef, but is like searching for special ingredients for these big restaurants, like on Earth. I'm like
Oh,
in real
cool.
life, but not
Yeah.
not. And so then I could just apply that in a sci-fi type of setting. And then I was still sort of stuck about how to give the thing its final shape. and I was reading Jules Verne, where and just that idea of sort of like the National Geographic Society, where you have these societies.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I mean, Jules Verne has that in the Earth to the Moon kind of thing. If,
Yeah, yeah.
when they go to the moon, they have that kind of club society. So that's just like, so instead of like, where's my chef hunter? Where is she, situated, my character? So I said, well, that concept of the National Geographic Society, or like Jules Verne, I was just like, well, I could just do that in my sci-fi setting. So that sort of all came together. And then what also was the final thing that for me, even now, a lot of the time when we write, it's kind of like, why am I writing? Am I just copying some other story that I really like? Like that's what I did when I was young. Like, oh, I love Star Wars, so I'm just going to make some big space battle, right? And so I found by this, every story has a real world connection. The Song of the Golden Brew, which you're starting to read, is like based off of my trip in China to Xinjiang. So like almost everyone had that connection. I found that helped me sort of ground it into
Yeah,
something. And that kind of really gave the whole thing for me, it's like shape to move forward. So, at the beginning, I was kind of like, am I just writing about space food? And
yeah.
maybe I'll just do the one first story, but then it kept going. And I don't know, I'm still enjoying it. I'll probably write other stuff at some point, but just the ideas sort of like, I just finished, there's two more that I haven't released yet.
Oh,
And I was
cool.
like, okay, that's it. Like after those two, and then just like other ideas started popping into my head. So I don't,
Yeah.
I can't
Well, I
seem to.
think that's the thing is like to me, like when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's really cool. And you'll have to people in the audience, you'll have to check out D.R. Scholl's books in the description, and you'll see where I'm really talking about this classic sci-fi, these covers. Like I used to do like graphic design and stuff way, way back when I was doing illustrating. And I have to say, I absolutely love just like your typography and the colors that you use, particularly with the Galactic Culinary Society. And I just thought it was super, super cool. So that like drew me in instantly. And I was just like, I didn't even look at the blurb. And then someone else was like, hey, did you check this out? I can't remember if like, I said something to you and you joined the podcast group, but they like wanted to make sure I didn't miss it because they knew it was kind of my thing. Because I love unique ideas like that that enter you into a sci-fi or a fantasy, world. I thought it was such a cool way of doing it. So when I read the book last night, I thought, oh man, you have so many great points of entry. I feel like you could literally just like think of anything, food wise, and then, go for it there. I would say like you and JCM Byrne, like you and Joe, both did such a great job of really going with food as like a cultural thing within your sci-fi books. Because I was, as a history teacher, I talk about cultural diffusion a lot, and one of the main ones we use as an example is food, particularly after like the Columbian Exchange and stuff in our courses. But a lot of the times we try to explain to kids that even before that, right, there's so many things that people are talking about doing or sharing over food. So I just loved how you in book one in particular, really use the society, and like their mission statement, right, was to share that kind of knowledge with everybody and have the enjoyment for all. So it was kind of like a Star Trek thing. I felt like a societal thing, but from a food aspect. It was just such a unique idea. So I got to say, it was such a cool idea to me, and just to me as a writer, gave you so many entry points, and different ways just to make up a really unique story. So I really liked that one though, in terms of like the edible sonnets and stuff. I thought that was just such a cool idea. And if that interests you, fans in the audience, just go buy it. I finished it in like one sitting, a little bit of work in between, taking care of my son, and then finished the rest once he went to bed. So I think it maybe took me like maybe an hour to read. So it was really awesome. But I just liked that you gave yourself such a unique idea and multiple entry points as a writer. I thought that was really smart. So
Yeah, it took a while. It was in my brain for a while before it turned into a story, a couple of
yeah.
years, like more than five perhaps, before it finally came all together. I should just give a shout out to Josh Newton, who did the art. He used to work for Disney. Now he works for, I think it's Wizards of the Coast, like the Magic cards or something along those lines. But I mean, so he did the work, and like, I mean, but I did a big, I think it was on ArtStation, the website. So I really spent a lot of time looking for someone who I thought fit, what I was looking for, which was a little bit that old school,
Yeah.
kind of like 70s sort of vibe that I was going for.
Yeah.
It was a little bit, I mean, dark times, whatever, and I didn't see much of that out there. Like that's like another kind of writing thing that people talk about, like, write something because you want it and you don't see it out there kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And so I just sort of wanted to do something that was a little more positive and fun. And his artwork, I thought like he had a couple of images that I was like that's exactly what I want. So I contacted him. It was a little hard to reach at first, but then finally
All the good people are.
I was like, I'm gonna have to find someone else. And then finally, like he got back to me, and we spent a lot of time back and forth developing those covers. The most he did, I think, 3 of them. There's this other guy who did, I think, a nice cover too. Joe Gambino did the last one for Smoke Signals, the last of the stories.
Oh, that's cool. No, they're super awesome. I was like, I really want to get them as posters at some point. So I hope that you've considered that at some point.
You could.
Oh,
Right
cool.
now, well, I have the shirt, but if you go to Redbubble, and I guess you search Galactic Culinary Society.
Okay.
So if you want it, because Redbubble's a bit crazy. I don't know if you've seen it. So if you wanted a shower curtains or bed sheets or pillowcases, like, I don't know why they have all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's like 75 different things that they'll print it on.
Oh, that's
so,
cool.
including my T-shirt here.
No, I love that cover too. It's hard for me to pick between the two. One of them being my favorites, but I just they just remind me of the classic sci-fi because my grandpa got me into sci-fi, and there were just so many that he was like, "Oh yeah, that was really good," and I didn't realize till years later, like the movies and TV shows, and particularly the books, getting into them. And I don't know, like we would go somewhere and I'd be like, "Oh, that's really cool," and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I read that. That was really good." Like Flash Gordon, that kind of thing. And I don't know, it brings up my childhood. So I would totally do a pillowcase if my wife would let me. So I might do it for my basement office, honestly. So it's funny that you mentioned that. And then I'll just change the shower curtain. Maybe she won't notice, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't got that other than the T-shirts. I haven't gotten anything else from them, so I don't know. Maybe a baseball cap or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. No, that's really cool. Yeah.
But I do have a question about that for you, just
Yeah.
about the artwork, because I've been debating about it more recently. Like I kind of went with that style because that's what I wanted to see. Like I missed it from when I was young,
Yeah.
and I might be older than you think I am because I kind of look youngish. But like I'm in my 5th decade, so um, so that's what I want to do. And I didn't care about like, whether it sells or doesn't sell and stuff. But I read articles and stuff that like the reason they stopped doing that, like now I have some like beautiful Isaac Asimov covers when I was young, but today it's all like just plain graphic kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that the publishers didn't want to ghettoize into like this is just Star Wars, Star Trek,
Oh, yeah,
which
yeah.
like, I like, but that's why they sort of dropped doing those kinds of, to me, more art, pictorial style covers, because it limits your audience, because some people will look at it who are like they're fans of that, so okay, but you're putting yourself into a ghetto where other people who maybe would like your writing don't. So I don't know, I just did it because I wanted to see it, and it kind of motivated me while I was writing, because while I continued writing, I go back with Josh and working on the next story. So like that, just like, especially the whole film thing that we've talked about. So obviously
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
young person, so just seeing it like was really strong, important for me.
yeah.
But I still have that like kind of nagging thing, like, does it still kind of hurt in terms of like people, being willing to take a try on it because they just see that and they go, oh, that's old school sci-fi, that's not for me. So I don't know, it's a question I have that I might look into later on. I don't know how you feel about it, or is
As
it?
as like an ex, like artist or whatever you want to say, just like out of practice, there's just like these. I was trying to say it nicely, but these newer covers that people are doing. I love the scenes personally, that give you, even if it's not a scene from the book, like yours, right? For book one, once it happened, it was so cool. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I don't know. I absolutely love the scenes. So I know, I totally understand what you're saying. I have like a sword and sorcery kind of short Kindle Vella thing I'm doing that I'm going to just put, I think I'm just going to do a book now, and put all 10 episodes I was going to originally put on there into like, it's probably like 100,000 words, and just put it into one book. But same thing, right? Like I want to go back to that, like Fritz Lieber kind of thing.
Oh,
Great. Yeah.
Very, very
You know what I
interesting.
mean? And but like some people, there are certain things I loved about, I have some of these Frazettas and stuff. I'm not really into how the women are portrayed because they're always, the damsel in distress. But in terms of the style, I still love. And I would love to do something similar to what you did. It kind of gave me hope. I was like, oh, I really like this and it attracted me. And I'm like, I kind of feel like it attracted me as your audience, if that makes sense better. Because you do want to find your niche, right? And I don't know, I personally felt like it really helped me to understand right away, especially after I read the blurb, because the next day I read the blurb and I was like, oh, this is totally my thing. And I added them all on Amazon. So I'm wondering, kind of the same thing as you, right? Should I do a tip, have somebody paint like, your sword and sorcery, update a couple things, but I still want some sort of, something that represents the nuance of,
Yeah.
what people are going to think for the genre. So I totally get it. But I don't know, for me, it totally worked. And I've shown a couple people, book 1 and 2, and they love the covers. I mean, I'm 36. The couple of people, I guess they're mid 40s. Some of my friends, are in between me and, my buddy Jack. But yeah, they really liked them. So I don't know. And I thought that it was really cool. Some of the fellow like female readers that I showed them to too thought that was, that we're really interested in your main character because of those,
Yeah.
because it put the woman in a place of empowerment, and they thought that was really cool. I don't know, and I thought it totally worked with the book, particularly when I was reading it last night. So I don't know, it's
Yeah.
an interesting thing to think about, but I thought it
Yeah.
worked really well. So
Yeah, I mean, people say you could always do the test of, putting up just 2 alternate covers
yeah,
and see
yep,
how people were. I can't really afford that, but I might get to it at some point just to see, because it's sort of like a question that you have, but you can't really answer
yep,
because obviously the artwork is great. The question is, does it help attract readers and different types of readers and stuff?
yeah, yeah.
So you can only know by trying. But just other quick, Fritz Lieber, very big influence.
Just because I'm thinking about it, you could always too just put everything into its own anthology later, as a Kickstarter or something, and
You're
and
you're
try
you're
that way.
you're diving into my mind, which you shouldn't be.
I have my 3 novella covers, which my friend Corey Ratliff did such a great job. But at some point, I just love painting covers, right? So he did this great stuff on Photoshop for me. They look absolutely amazing, and they were so much cooler than in my head. And he gave me such a fair and decent price. So anybody who needs anything, go to Corey. But I do want to do like a special painted cover, and I think it'd be really cool to do Kickstarter that way. So that's where I was kind of, saving some of my money that way, just making sure the rest of it looked really good. But he knocked it out of the park. But at some point, I would like to do the painted, like your typical painted covers. So yeah, Kickstarter is definitely the route I'm going to go once all 3 are done, and kind of put them in my own anthology. But
Right.
so you mentioned the 5 books, and I just want for the audience, I was just kind of curious at kind of what format you were going for. So far, to me, it seemed episodic from reading book 1 and 2 so far. So I was kind of just interested if that was what you were going for, and kind of why you chose that format.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of, if we mention the sort of like the Indiana Jones kind of thing, where it's
Okay.
meant to be more adventure than like epic kind of thing, even though there's, I mean, people have called it, whatever the term is for space epic or whatever, but still more following the format of, well, like Flash Gordon
Yeah,
or
yeah.
that kind of thing, where it's a bit more isolated episodes, like the original Star Trek, or there's not Brave New World, but Strange New World.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, so I wanted to go back for that kind of vibe and feeling. Naturally, as you're right, there's little things that go through, and I'm not too crazy too. Also, when you get to like book, I don't know if I ever get to book 10 or 12, some character pops up from book 1, and it's like, who's that? You got to remember. So I don't know if I'd go that far, but to me, it was trying much more for that kind of individual episode stories where you could kind of like drop in on any one, and you don't necessarily have to have read the other ones, like just whatever you happen to pick up off the shelf, you
Yeah,
could
yeah.
follow it. It's not, I know on Amazon, it's not like that. You see the order, and it's probably better to read it in order, because some characters took over more than not the main character, but some of her sidekick characters took over a bit more than I expected. And so it helps a bit to follow them. But the overall format is a bit more along the lines of the traditional Star Trek or Indiana Jones or Sherlock Holmes, where it's just like, here's an adventure with this character, and you don't necessarily have to know too much about the other stories. Though if you do follow it, there's little bits that are in there. So that's the balance also that I wanted to sort of find, because I know today it's often like long, like continuous stories all the time and cliffhangers, and you got to keep reading. And I sort of said, I don't really want to do the cliffhanger thing, but there are little bits that'll carry over from one story to the next. So that
Oh,
is
cool.
there too, that it develops and you get to know more about, the main character, and so on. So yeah, definitely more of that kind of adventure episodes kind of thing.
Well, it was definitely something I was looking for. I had such a Ness Brown's The Scourge Between Stars or Worlds. I'm totally blanking right now. Great novella and sci-fi, like pumped me up. And then since then, I dipped down. I've been having such a hard time finding like the right sci-fi. And yours and hers are totally different, but like totally, you know, filled that sci-fi gap for me recently. I have an arc that I'm reading that's really good, but it's been hard to get to it with my work. It's by Jamie Castle. Great book. And but it's been so hard for me. So for to be able to step into yours last night and to get some sci-fi quick, efficiently, and really enjoy it, just really pumped me up to to get back into sci-fi. It's always like this part in the year, it's hard for me to do arcs that are anything more than novella size. So in the future, I will be thinking about that. Shame on me for not considering that earlier, but I just have to say, like, it really fit that niche really well. I have this week pretty much where I'm slammed, so I only have maybe an hour per day tops, assembling the time together like yesterday to read. So it's so cool that later on I can read book 2 and finish by tomorrow, and then still get everything I have to get done. So I'm actually throwing all of yours on at once this week to try and just go through that way. But it really left me wanting more, which is why I started, book 2 last night. But yeah, I love the episodic feel, because for someone like me, it just works a lot better sometimes, particularly if they're just a little shorter. And I know everybody says they want these long epics, but for me, especially being a dad now, like, it's just a lot easier for me to to read novellas in between different reads, or just to feel
Right.
like I'm still reading something, leisurely, rather than these massive books all the time. So I thought it was just really like paced really well. And I loved also too how you inserted different aliens at different times, cultures, the world building. Even though it was like 55 Amazon pages, it felt like it was such a much more expansive world. So I don't know, you did a lot with the words that you had, which was really cool. But I think it also, it makes total sense to me that, your background, right, with screenwriting, that you do a lot, with limited words. So I don't know, I thought it came together really well. But I do have to mention this though, because I thought this was so cool from your Amazon page. For our fourth question, curious to explore the galaxy, brave enough to face many tentacled aliens who will disintegrate you on sight. If you're truly hungry for adventure, there's only the Galactic Culinary Society. Let Jeane Oberon, chef hunter extraordinaire, if unfortunately human, love that part, be your guide to the dining rites of countless alien races. Join the GCS today. And remember, it's an eat or be eaten universe out there. I got to know how you came up with this tagline, this blurb. It was absolutely amazing. And how did you make it fit into the books you've written so far?
Yeah, I mean, my approach, first of all, those things are always hard to write,
Mm-hmm.
um, like
For sure.
blurbs. I hadn't even thought about it before now that you're talking to me, but because we're talking about film and this writing, which in my mind was a little bit separate, but now that you're bringing it up to me, I'm realizing doing all these synopsis things that I've had to do for film applications or treatments and so on. So actually that was there already, like in my background, without me even realizing it subconscious till this moment that we're talking. So that was definitely one thing that helped, because that, like, through film, I just had to do that till I get financing to do a project, which is a bit different than like writing a blurb to catch a reader, right? But it's sort of the same idea. So then when I approached this specific thing, though, what I did is I went and looked at a whole bunch of books that I really liked and read their blurbs. So I looked online on Amazon. I looked at some of the older books on my bookshelves. So something like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in particular.
A good
There's
one.
a older series, which I don't know if you know, by Keith Laumer Retief, which was a bit of a inspiration for these stories as well.
Hmm.
So I just kind of was getting a bit the vibe, the style that I wanted. And then it was just sort of a writing thing of having to write something, longer, and then slowly narrow it down
Yeah.
to what I thought sort of fit to get across, because the kind of, that's maybe the film thing where, if it's like more than a couple, like 5, 6 lines, you're going to start losing someone because you see these big long
Yep.
descriptions, and like, well, I'm not, I don't have, you just lose the reader. So keeping it short and concise, but as a writer, the way to get there is often writing something longer, shortening it, trying lots of different versions. So the length, and then sort of getting it down shorter. And there were a lot of versions of it until I was like, okay, it's enough. Let me put it out there. But definitely just looking at similar types of books that I thought were kind of like in the same, even not necessarily today, because there aren't that many books out there now. That's why I said even what motivated me to write it was because I'm not seeing that kind of sci-fi story.
Yeah.
But they did exist more, back in the day. So that's kind of, I went and just looked at the book covers and read them. Some of them, which I don't think you see it now, but like for the Retief, one of the ones that I had, like from the 70s, a book, like you read the thing, and it's like that's not the story even. Like you
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
like, it's pretty deceptive in terms of what the whole tone and style and thing is about. And it's like I wouldn't go that far, but like it just really then clicks in your mind. Like this is just, you are trying to get people's attention, and like I said, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, even that book, it was a used book that I got just more recently, so it's even older than I am in terms of, I would have been too young to have bought that. So I think like by the 80s when I was buying books, they didn't really, the backs of books weren't really deceptive like this one was. This was like not the story.
Yeah.
Like it was a different, it was presenting it more like Star Trek, and the Retief books are not like that. They're much more satirical, much closer to like the Hitchhikers kind of thing, but it presented it as like straight ahead sci-fi.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't the wrong story, but it was just like giving you a different impression of what, right? So, but that just got me thinking a little bit of what's the tone, how I want to present it. I don't want to be deceptive like that was, but you have a lot of leeway then in your voice to come up with the blurb. So that was, so, and I just put the time aside in my work process for putting these things out, like, I'm going to have to do the blurb and not just rush it off like in an afternoon kind of thing. It's like something over a couple of weeks that I would come back to every now and again, and keep refining until I was ready. Like maybe I was doing it side by side of doing the cover or something else. Like I was doing that alongside of something else, the
Yeah.
editing maybe or something. I don't remember what. Like I sent a text to a text editor. So yeah, so it was a bit of a process just for a couple of lines, right? A couple
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
sentences.
I thought it was a great ad. It'd be like something you see in a sci-fi world, right? As an ad for the, the society. So I don't know. I
Yeah,
thought
well,
that.
that's the idea. You want to get pull people, right?
Yep.
Like folks into the thing, because that's what's like in my head. Like I'm getting, when I'm thinking of my stories and stuff, or when you read other people's stories, you sort of want to get lost in that world for,
Yep.
a little bit of time and stuff. So you want to draw people in and keep the whole thing going, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned it because I haven't had much feedback on the blurb.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
I went
I
over it with some people, but
I don't know. It's got to be one of the. I would say I read a lot of them. It's got to be definitely top three I've seen. And I'm kind of being nice to the other two, which were great. But yeah, yeah, I definitely thought it was like top three that I've seen for sure. It reminded me of like one of the old Star Trek ads from just like the overall that the intro and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it pulled really well from that kind of thing, and yeah, I thought it did a great job, especially once I got done, reading book one last night. I thought it did a really great job of, explaining. And again, that was a great, I think, advertisement for yourself because it really leaves you wondering a lot of things. And then, it again just gives you multiple entry points, I think. So you automatically set up that Indiana Jones and space adventure kind of thing, like the episodic thing, I think, with that type of blurb. So I thought that was really smart. But yeah, it was really cool.
good to know because I just sort of went on my gut a little bit, but they're really hard to do, because you're trying to
I do.
summarize your whole story in a couple of sentences and
Yeah.
stuff. And it's often that tendency to try and put like too much in.
Yep.
And then you sort of like for this one, I kind of went for an angle, which is, more that kind of advertisement for the GCS as a whole than
Yep.
just like this is what the story is about kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once you have an angle, that sort of helps too. But you know, I don't know. It was a fun little exercise, I guess, writing exercise to do.
You can do mine next time. I was like, took
Well,
me
I
way
mean,
too
okay, well,
long.
maybe, yeah. If people are willing to pay me, then maybe.
That's fair. I know a bunch of us are like, yeah, take our money. So I was just curious at how you centered the science fiction world building to account for these new culinary delights of different species within your books. I thought that was so cool that it wasn't just humans and human recipes, that you had taken into account that in a science fiction, setting, you'd have multiple species with different taste buds, or different flavors, different cultural backgrounds. So I was just kind of curious how you kind of put that together, in kind of a different way to kind of show the cultural diffusion of your world building. I don't know. It was just really unique.
Yeah, I mean, part of that just may be that I'm weird. So it just comes a bit like from who knows where.
I thought it was cool.
Like everyone else is alien to me. So um, part of it is in terms of the world in general, this is the thing that like that I came up with maybe when I was 13, I guess. So it's been in the back of my mind, not for these culinary stories, but just the general world that it's kind of set in. That was sort of in the back of my mind that I would just sort of think about quite a bit when I was young. Then I went to film school. I sort of stopped thinking about that kind of stuff. Then it would
Yeah.
sort of pop into my mind when I had saw something else that would make me think I want to write some sci-fi. Then I'd forget about it. So it's not like I thought about it all the time, or I'm like Tolkien sitting there writing all kinds of stuff. But I'd written stories back when I was young, and then would occasionally return to that sort of general world. And then when I started had this idea, I was kind of like, well, I could sit down and like make up a whole world for it, or I could just use what I already have that nobody knows about anyway. So why don't I just set it there? And it kind of fit anyways, because I had some things there that I thought would fit with it. I also decided which fit with that world, because that world, even when I was young, was a little bit. I mentioned the Retief books, which are a little bit like Hitchhikers, satirical, sort of light in tone, funny. And so once I thought food a little bit, my take on it is like I can't be too serious with it because it's just not really going to make sense in terms of all these different food ideas I have. Like they're aliens. How do you even digest the same? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like too many little details would maybe crop up. But as soon as you put a little humor into it, certain things that you might otherwise say, that doesn't make sense. How could aliens even have the same taste buds or whatever? Sort of like doesn't necessarily matter as much. I still try to have, there is actually a foundation underneath that accounts for that, but it just becomes a little just in the tone of the story, it becomes a little less important. And so you could just concentrate on making up your weird culinary food, different ideas, just because it's a little bit like tongue in cheek and we don't have to take it too serious. Like in
Yeah.
Star Wars, they have in Star Trek, they have food stuff, but and you always kind of say a little bit like in what is it, the Klingons who eat the live worms or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else do they eat? And like, if you think too much about it, it doesn't necessarily make too much sense for an alien. But if it's tongue in cheek, it doesn't really matter as much. So that was sort of conceptually. My brother initially thought, because he's the big food guy, thought I'd be more like grim and serious about it. But when he read it, he really liked these. He called me right after reading, like the first time he's liked anything I've done. So I was like, oh, I might be onto something, because like that's what surprised me a little bit
Yeah.
compared to the film stuff I've done. People like, yeah, that's good. But this is like, oh, so that encouraged me to keep going.
That's cool.
Then for the ideas, it's like the specifics, like the secrets of umami, which comes a bit from my experiences in China. I don't really know. It's just this weird, like I get an idea of something, I see something, and that gives a weird image in my head that then becomes part of the story. So in Secrets is a little bit from the Chinese calligraphy and stuff,
That's cool.
and it just sort of transforms in a weird way in my head. And then as I think, well, I want to write something, I just sort of force it a little more along, into like give it the form and a shape rather than just a weird little image or a little funny idea that I've had. And and I'll change it and shape it to fit the story. So, and then each of the stories have something like that. And that's also what has kept me right. Like the second one, also in China, Xinjiang. I remember being in a bus, and so the bus, the little truck that we were in, we were two families that had rented a truck. And so there's these just wide, empty grasslands, like endless. And there they have I mean, there's the Uyghurs, but they ride horses like still today. And there's this kid like galloping across, on his horse, like in the distance, like out of the old West kind of thing. And just watching that, but he was so like tied to the green land. I was just like, I just saw a person sitting on like the grass taking them along more than one. So when you get to the story, you'll see where that image came from.
Oh, cool.
The beer comes from stuff that then we actually drank and had there, and it's a little less weird in that one, the food. So each one was sort of has something like that, where initially it was like just travels that I had done that I was thinking on, and now that I'm writing, it's like I'm actually thinking ahead a little bit. So
Yeah.
like summers ago, we went to Italy, and we went to Naples, and I arranged in advance to meet with this fellow Enzo Coccia, who was on Stanley Tucci's Searching for Italy for pizza thing.
Oh, that's cool.
This was arranged in advance to go and meet him and study how to make pizza with him, and we met like over a couple of days, and I failed at it. But it gives a good story that hasn't been released yet, but like that's the next one after.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
it sort of shifted from experiences in my past to like, oh, well, now if I have an idea, I could go seek it out and learn more about it and then turn it into my weird, strange sci-fi thing.
That's awesome. But that's again those multiple entry points. I think it just was genius on your part. It just gives you so many places to do
I just like to eat it.
that. That's fair. So I just want to make sure I get to this one before our last question, because I just want to just know what's been your favorite piece of science fiction that you've created within these 5 books, and maybe why was that the like favorite thing that you created? It could be like a species, could be like part of a story. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious that what was like you're like, oh, this is really cool kind of thing.
Yeah, well, there's two answers to that. So one is just also the larger answer of, because I mentioned before the film and the other stuff that I've written. So the whole thing is my favorite thing
Cool. Yeah.
because of all the other writing that I've done.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
this really stood out compared to other stuff where like, oh, I like that stuff I worked on in the past. But this is really just like, I mean, I finally accepted the nerdiness that is me.
Yeah.
Like always trying to be a cool, arty filmmaker kind of person, right? I was always forcing myself to be in the past. And now it's like, no, this is what I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sci-fi geek. But I mean, the thing that popped out, which maybe answers the question, but is there's the little alien Stursty who shows up in some of the other stories, the
Mm.
little squid-like alien that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was something that kind of sort of surprised me that was just a character meant for that story, based off of an alien race that I made up when I was 13, but that really sort of like his tentacles got into me more than I had planned, and now so he shows up in other stories, and
Oh, that's cool.
he's become more of her partner than I would have expected originally when I first had
Oh,
the
that's
idea.
cool. I liked him, so I'm really glad
Yeah,
to
yeah,
hear
it's a
that.
funny.
That actually makes me
He's
really
really fun.
excited.
It's fun to write.
Yeah. Sometimes those characters just won't listen, will they?
Yeah,
Well, I just want to make sure we got enough time for this last one. So, like I said, it's always an important one. It's always one that people come back to and check us out for, particularly for your guys' interviews, hear what you authors and creators have to say. So, do you have any news, updates, or current projects that you can share with us?
Well, there is for this series. So there's 2 more stories that'll be coming out. One is the one I just mentioned, which is when I went to Naples. So it's a pizza focused,
Even better.
and that one, in terms of news, so there's a whole other project which I'll get in, which may or may not. You talk about putting it all together in one anthology. So far I have 7 stories. I mean, there's 5, but there's 2 more.
Oh, cool.
There that aren't released. But the idea that I've had, and this I don't know if we have time for it, but is one of the research I did for one of the stories. I spoke to Andy Weir about special relativity science. And I had this like 10-page, we spoke about other stuff. Just in the pandemic, we started messaging and kind of like went, from the author of The Martian, right?
Yeah.
Project Hail Mary. And so then I started asking him, because he claims to be a big specialist on that topic.
Yeah.
So, and I wanted to write about it to understand it. So I had this like 10-page interview just on that subject. And I was like, this would be interesting for people to then read after the story, because like they see how, right? And so my idea then became, well, what if each story, because I have contacted different people. There's the Seamus Blackley, who's the creator of the Xbox, because he's mentioned in one of the stories for this. He's actually big into like sourdough bread making, and he posts it all the time. So I contacted him. And so what if I had, after each story, these little interviews with these real people that get a bit more into the details that I have to leave out of the story
Yeah,
for
yeah,
the sake of telling the story, because you can't just put it all in, you know,
yeah,
it'll be a
yeah.
snooze fest. And so recently I just got in touch with who, she makes a guest appearance, Samantha Cristoforetti, who's the first female astronaut on the International Space Station.
Yeah.
So I contacted like her agent, and she passed me to the European Space Agency, where I got to make an application there. And they just got like, yeah, she'll answer your questions.
It's
And
cool.
so like I already submitted the questions, and then she'll send them back. So the idea is that all these stories will eventually be put together as an anthology,
Oh,
and
that's
these,
cool.
you know, little Q&As after them. And since it might, because I have so much other stuff to do, it might be a little while that these two other stories, especially the pizza one. So if anybody wants it, they could find me on Facebook, DR Schoel, and then I'll just send them a PDF. So I don't want to talk about it. And like, you know, then it's like, I don't know, 6 months until the story comes
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
So if anybody wants, you know, the others are on Amazon, but if someone likes the stuff and they want to read the pizza one that I just referenced, then just get in contact with me on Facebook,
That's
and you
cool.
know, I'll send the PDF. So
That's awesome.
that's what's news.
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds really cool, by the way. I think that's cool to insert those at different points. Just to remind our audience, whether or not you're new or returning, don't forget below us, whether or not you're listening to the audio or watching the video on YouTube, you can find DR Schoel anywhere in those social descriptions, or sorry, social links underneath the description. You can also find this episode and Dana's links also anywhere where, you know, our podcast is as well. So yeah, definitely take a look at, you know, the Culinary Society, and make sure that you are just check it out. That's amazing, amazing covers that you know, you guys have absolutely amazing stories. I really look forward to reading the rest this week. So like I said, as soon as I can, you know, get my reviews to you, I'll send them to you. And then for the audience, I'll put the links to my reviews in as well, so you can watch the YouTube videos, the shorts, things like that. Check out the blog. But thank you so much for coming on today. I'm so glad, you know, we were able to connect, and this has been awesome. I can't wait to finish the rest and have you come back for like a spoilers one soon, and kind of chit chat there. I will be doing some different seminar stuff that I'll invite you to too, in terms of different, you know, sci-fi stuff. I think it'll be a really good fit for a couple of my other guests. Like I said, kind of into the parking lot thing, the same. But if there's anything else I can do to help you out, you know, send it to me, email me, message me, and I'll put it in my blog, or, you know, make sure that people see it. Make sure you keep me updated. So I'll definitely have to check out that story as well with the pizza, because that's one of my favorite foods. But other than that, thank you so much for coming on. And, you know, if you need anything in the future, just let me know. But other than that, I look forward to, you know, seeing you online and in the group, and, you know, just chatting with you and picking your brain about your stories. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a real blast. And also, if you or anyone has any culinary space ideas, let me know, and I will
Oh,
steal them. I will steal them.
don't tempt me with a good time. So I will definitely be
Well,
turning my
if you
brain. So if
tell,
I have any, I'll definitely send them to you. That'd
yeah,
be
but I
great.
will. You will get no credit.
I don't care. That's
Well,
fine. I
credit.
just want
You'll
to,
get a
I
thank
would
you.
just
You
love
get
to
a
see what
thank.
you do with them. That
You'll get
natural
a
culture
thank you.
diffusion.
A big thank you. A whole page. Thank you.
That's awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to do that. But yeah, other than that, I hope you have a good rest of the day, my friend. And I will email you, you know, and let you know when this scheduled episode is going to go up. But other than that, thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of the day, my friend.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. I'll see you later.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.